We're going to talk about motivation, how to stay motivated for a longer term game, and some things you can do to kind of stay on that path coming up. What's up guys, Tim Ruswick here from Game Dev Underground, and if you are new here, we routinely post videos on motivation and marketing for game developers, so consider subscribing and hit the bell to make sure you get notified. But today we are going to talk about motivation, more specifically longer term motivation. So I've got a lot of tips on the channel, I've got a lot of videos about some of the stuff that I've done to keep myself motivated or to recover from burnout or to kind of do all that stuff. There's a ton of resources, so check it out. But specifically today, I'm going to give you 5 tips, 5 of my best tips on motivation for longer term. And some of these I've covered videos on before. Some of these are adaptations or iterations from other things, and some of them are new. So let's just get into them and kind of go through them. So number one, this was a big one for me, for real. And it is don't obsess, but you still got to be consistent. So for me, my biggest issue in finishing a game for a longer term was my obsession. And like I would get super obsessed. And this sounds kind of counterintuitive. So hear me out, because when you think of obsession, you would think that would be a good thing, because then I'd be working on it more and I would get, more done. But that's not how it worked out. How it actually worked out was I would obsess the shit over things that just go and work 14-hour days and miss sleep and not answer my girlfriend or friends that wanted to hang out or whatever it is, and I just obsess about the game. And that led to burnout, right? That's not sustainable for long periods of time. You can do stuff like that, sure, for short time. I find a game jam after a game jam, I'm pretty exhausted, let alone, weeks or months. So having to work on myself a bit and kind of get over that obsession was really important for me, because it kind of taught me balance, life-work balance, and kind of balancing this thing. And, longer projects aren't about the sprint. Game jams are about the sprint. And sprints are fun, right? Everybody likes to do these quick little sprints and see what we can come up with. But game jams are about, the long-term marathon run. You got to be the turtle, not the hare, in the longer term games. And I think it's different than like mobile games or short single mechanic games or game jams and stuff like that, in the fact that obsession can kind of help you in the short term. It can help you in game jams. It can help you get stuff out there. But for longer term, not so much. It can burn you out. It can isolate you. It can damage you in a lot of ways, especially if you miss sleep and stuff like that. Sleep is really important. That sounds cliche, but whatevs. It is. But just understand yourself, right? Like, just don't, if you find yourself obsessing and shutting off people and going at it a little too hard, just back up a little bit. So point number 2 is on the back of obsession, and that would be to take time off. And I know that, again, clashes with consistency, right? I preach be consistent, do it daily, but I also preach take time off, downtime is productive. Like, those are my things, and those are very clashing ideals. Those ideas kind of clash with each other. But this world is not black and white. This world is not a 1 or 0. It is a beautiful paradox of all kinds of conflicting ideas that have to work together. And one of the things that you have to know is you have to know when you need a break, and you have to be able to take a break. For me, when I was like obsessed on stuff, sometimes, like if I've worked on something for a month, maybe I want to take a weekend getaway, or maybe I want to go on a week, away and do some cool shit. Maybe I want to go camping or something like that. Like something that kind of gets my mind off. Again, for me, because I'm obsessive, I have to go places where I can't bring my laptop or where I choose not to, which, that complicates things, because then I'll end up, like, I will legit, on a river in a campground, fucking take out my laptop and start working. It's happened before. So I know myself enough to know that will happen, so I intentionally plan ahead for it. If you're like me, that might be a good tip for you to just kind of schedule your downtime, take time off. If you have a little more control than I do, then, you know, just pay attention to how you feel and take the time off that you need, but get back into it and get back into your consistency, and don't feel guilty about it. Don't feel bad. You need the time off, and you got to take the time off. That's point number 2. Point number 3, this is a good one. This one helped me a lot, is aligning milestones with events. And so I guess 3.0 would be actually have milestones. 3.1 would be align milestones with events. But you definitely want to have milestones. And milestones, I think, are these smaller objectives that are part of the larger game. So, and this, because when you're working on a large game, especially near the end, there's so much stuff in between where you are and where you got to go. It helps to have kind of stepping stones, like you're going up a staircase. So, okay, here's a step, here's a step, here's a step. It helps you gauge progress, how far you're up the staircase. If you've ever went up like one of these crazy like lighthouses, we went to one in St. Augustine, which is pretty cool. These long, massive structures or stairs up mountains, you can't see the end to those stairs. And those stairs are like, you don't even want to start because you can't see the end. So milestones are like your steps to the end. And you want to make sure that you have milestones because they're really important, especially for longer term games. So tying milestones to events is one of my ways that I stay accountable. So having milestones is really important, but a lot of times what I noticed with me is I would just ignore them. I would say I want to have all the levels done by August or whatever. And I would just ignore them. I'd just be like, well, I said that, but don't really have to follow it because, you know, I made it. So, but that's a really shitty thing to do. And it's got me in trouble, especially when I couldn't even hold myself accountable. So one of the things that I did to combat that part of myself was I would tie it to events. So let's say if I wanted to go to PAX or I wanted to go to GDC, I would say, by the time GDC comes around, I have to finish this part of my game. I have to finish this milestone. And that's my ticket to GDC. Otherwise, I can't go. I've also seen people do things like this at PAX where they have to show part of their game, right? Or they have a booth or something like that. So they have to finish that milestone by the time they get there. That's really good motivation to kind of, you know, get that extra kick. Again, be careful where it kind of overlaps with obsession and burnout. But for me, that was always a good kick in the pants. And one of the cool things about like showing your game off as a milestone is usually the event is like a little vacation, and you can kind of talk to people about it and get feedback and all that stuff. And that hearing all the good things people say about your game and all the compliments you get is kind of a great motivator to come back and say, okay, now I need to get to milestone number 2. I know what I need to fix. I know what I need to modify. It's like a breath of fresh air in a way that like not many other things do for me. And you can tie it to, you know, internet events too. It doesn't have to be physical events. They can be game jams. I've tied them to Ludum Dares before. Like, I got to finish this milestone, or I can't join Ludum Dare. I got to work on my shit. That has really, 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 really helped me stay motivated. So that's number 3. Number 4, which is similar to a milestone, but you got to pick a deadline. You got to pick a final, like, end date. You got to pick a launch date, basically. There are 1,000 ways to pick a deadline, and we can't go into all the little details of how that's best and how you should do that, because every game is different, every person is different. But if you don't have a deadline, your game can go on forever. It can evolve, it can change, it can modify, and you can just get stuck in like this limbo of, my game is cool, but it's not released, but it's not done, but it's not released. And it's just, you can stay there forever. So you need a deadline, and the deadline is the cutoff date where you say, okay, maybe I didn't get everything I needed into the game or everything I wanted into the game, but it is complete enough where I'm going to release it. And this is one of the cool things about working in iteration cycles too, is rather than start with this big ass design concept, this huge game that you want to start from the beginning, if you start with the core game and then you add a feature on top of it, and you add a feature on top of that, and you add a feature on top of that. So work in iteration cycles, right? Just add little pieces as you go. You end up with, you can kind of have a complete product at any point. So when you have a deadline, and let's say you know you're not as far as long as you want to be, you still have a complete product. You still have something that works and plays. One of the worst things you can do is get super far into a project and not have a playable game, not have a working prototype. So picking a deadline kind of helps you think like that and say, okay, well, shit, this is going to launch next month, so I really got to get the whole thing, polished and packaged. But it also kind of motivates me. I like to announce deadlines publicly, so not only to like friends and family that are like will hold me accountable, but to public too. Like say, hey, this comes out whenever. And then if you got 100 people, 1,000 people, whatever, waiting for your game, it's kind of hard to say, well, it's pushed back till September and then do it again. No, you don't want to do it again. So one thing I will say on deadlines real quick though is usually I calculate how long I think it's going to take, and then I give myself an extra 2 or 3 months. I do that for 2 reasons. One, because it always takes longer than you think it will. Humans suck at estimating. And 2, I actually like to have time for marketing when the game is done, because marketing takes a mental shift that is different from programming for me, from development. It takes the extrovert side of my brain, whereas I think programming can kind of embrace the introvert side of my brain, and it's not really social, whereas marketing is very social. So it takes a mental shift. So for me to do both at the same time is really complicated. So I like to separate the two, and like have extra time between when I finish the game and when I launch the game, so I can spend all my time on marketing and doing that stuff. That being said, I am a marketing guy, so maybe other people are better at it than me. I don't know, but that's just what I do. And finally, number 5, this is going to sound super like woo-woo, but monitor your feelings. Okay, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a doctor, but we talk a lot about self-improvement on this channel. We talk a lot about motivation and getting to know yourself and that kind of thing, because paying attention to your feelings is really important. Because if you feel like you are getting burnt out, mental health is a thing too. In at least in United States culture, we don't value mental health as much as we do physical health. So you can call out from work if you have a cold, but if you feel burnt out and you don't feel like going to work, you can't call out and say, hey, I don't feel like going into work. They won't accept that as an excuse, when they should, because mental health is just as important as physical health. And that's why I say monitor your feelings, understand like how you feel, understand the things that are coming in your brain. Like for me, like one of the big signs of burnout for me was when I started avoiding my computer. There would be periods where I would either not want to get out of bed, or when I got out of bed, I did not want to go near my computer. I would make every excuse possible. I would go to Starbucks. I would go see movies. I would do all kinds of shit to stay away from my computer. And at first I didn't know that was happening. I didn't know that because I wasn't paying attention. But once I started paying attention to myself, and I found out like how I react to things, right? And this has definitely happened over the last 10 years or so as I've gotten older, as like I didn't pay attention to stuff at all like in high school and stuff, but definitely over the last 10 years as I've kind of gotten older and got a little more mature, I pay attention to how I feel and how I interact with the world. And that is a big sign to me when I avoid my computer that something is wrong. And so rather than avoid whatever it is and let it give me anxiety and let it affect my sleep patterns and do all that, I pay attention to it. I feel it. I ask myself, why am I feeling this way? And then I can usually solve it. And usually it has to do with some things that I perceive to be out of my control. And I sit down and I say, okay, how can I take control of this situation? Or how can I fix this? Or how can I make it better? And that has this piece. I know it sounds like one of the least important things, but it's one of the most important things of this whole thing, because I noticed for longer term motivation for me, it is not usually the project that derails me. It's not usually the complexity or the technical difficulty or anything like that. It is something comes up it affects me in a way that I'm unaware of, and I just start feeling uncomfortable. I start feeling like I don't want to do the work. I start feeling that way. And now that I pay attention to that feeling and I understand where it comes from, and then I can fix it at the source, I can take a week off, I can take a month off, I can take, day trips somewhere. I can consciously make choices to reduce workload. Sometimes, dude, I've avoided pieces of code, so I outsource them. I call up one of my friends. I'm like, hey, dude, $100, can you write this piece of code? Or I have a series of outsourcers that I pay by hour too. Yeah, you don't want, you want to reduce your expenses, obviously, but there's so many times where I've hit a roadblock like that, and the roadblock is not technical. I'm perfectly capable of writing that piece of code or making that piece of art or whatever it is, but there's some kind of mental barrier there for whatever reason. So getting over those mental barriers, understanding when there are mental barriers is really important, and then just moving forward regardless of what happens, with no judgment, with no feelings of guilt, with no feelings of any of that stuff, was really important for me. So this has been a hell of a journey for this video. It went a lot longer than I thought it would, but I hope you guys got some use out of it. These were definitely the top 5 things that have helped keep me motivated through a lot of my longer projects, and I hope that they keep you motivated as well. I know that a lot of us are working on projects now, so please leave me your top tip for motivation down below in the comments. I always love to hear from you guys, but this especially, I'm not a master at this. This is just my experience, so I would love to hear other people's experiences and maybe adapt some other people's techniques. But until then, I am Tim Ruswick, and I will see you guys next time.